Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing NoBrainBillPaid in a 15-minute game on chess.com. No increment in this game. This is a climbing the rating ladder. I play lower rated players for instructive purposes and see what happens. So my opponent is white, and they open with e4. Let's play a Sicilian. I'm feeling in a combative mood, at least on the chessboard. I haven't played any chess today. I've given some lessons today, but this is my first game of the day. Okay, c3. I think the strongest moves against the c3 Sicilian, also known as the Alapin Sicilian, are knight f6 or d5. I'm going to play d5. I actually don't play d5 so often, but I don't know why I would have a hang-up about d5, because you could consider this an improved version of a Scandi, because white's knight can't come to c3. So, okay, d4. I'll just play knight f6 and develop. So with these no increment games, I think it is important to play proactively when it comes to time pressure. So start trying to play fast when you have, say, 5 minutes left, when you got 1/3 of your time left. Because if you wait any longer, it's going to be a mad time scramble. I mean, even with 5 minutes left, you're playing a 5-0 game. Let's play bishop g4 and just pin this knight. I kind of like this arrangement for black. e6, knight c6, bishop e7. We'll keep the tension in the center for now. Okay, e6. And I would expect castles from white. I like what they're doing. Bishop e2, just making sure if I take, they can recapture with the bishop. Okay, so I could play knight c6 here. I think I will. Just a good developing move. You sometimes have to look at c4 in these positions, but c4, I can move the queen. Let's say queen d8 or queen d6. Okay, and my opponent captures instead. So now I have a choice. Do I want to trade queens, or just recapture on c5? Either queen takes c5 or bishop takes c5. I'm inclined to play bishop takes c5, because if I take white's queen right away, then white can sort of improve their position by taking with the rook. Sometimes when you're the one who makes the capture down a file in particular, your opponent gets, a slight advantage in the sense that they were able to centralize their piece by recapturing. So yeah, I think I like just bishop takes c5. Okay, so white takes. I'm going to take with the knight. If I take with a pawn, I just have an isolated pawn for apparently nothing. So play knight takes. So a queenless middle game on our hands here. I think I'm doing fine. I have all my minor pieces in the game. I haven't committed my king yet, so I'll have options. Castling either way, or perhaps even keeping the king in the center. That is an option when you've traded queens. More so of an option than if the queens remained on board, because your king tends to be safer in the middle. You're not exposed to direct attacks. But bishop g5, okay, so white's developing and interfering with any castling queenside plan. However, this bishop is subject to attack, and I'm already thinking what's the best way to attack it. Probably h6, because if bishop h4, this move knight f4 looks pretty annoying, jumping in and attacking this bishop. So yeah, I'd really like to get my knight here. Could also play f6, but f6... pushing the forget about it pawn. Ben Feingold says never play f6. I mean, it would be acceptable here, but I don't see why I should weaken e6 without a good reason. So I think castling is also fine. If knight bd2, then I could play h6, but I think I'm going to go h6 right away. I kind of like this just to see where white puts that bishop. Making sure my screen capture is good. I'm always paranoid something's going to be wrong, and I'll just be talking for 30 or 45 minutes until I notice. Okay, bishop h4. Yeah, so I think let's jump in here. Attack the bishop, and if that bishop moves to, say, c4 or b5, I think I'll just capture. Just take on f3 and enjoy my better pawn structure. Could also perhaps consider knight h3 a deflection move, but might be able to just play king h1. Knight takes g2 wouldn't work, because king takes and white would be defending the knight. Again, this is assuming that this bishop leaves somewhere like this. White could play bishop d1. That's actually a pretty likely candidate move. It's a little awkward for white with the bishop on the back rank. Not typically where you like to have a bishop, but it would allow white to recapture on f3 with the bishop as opposed to taking with the pawn. So I'm just planning what I would do against bishop d1, because that's the strongest looking move I see here. Okay, white plays rook e1 instead. So I could just trade and then take, and I have just a better pawn structure out of that. I don't get much more than that. I mean, I probably should be satisfied with that. Can I play even trickier somehow? Probably not. Castling queenside might be nice, but there is this bishop sitting here. So g5 is another move I'm considering, but bishop g3, I don't see what I've gained by that. I could take once on e2 and then play just castles or something, but then white gets to go knight bd2. So yeah, I think I'm going to take and just get the better pawn structure. Yeah, I don't see a good way to exploit this pin. The pin on the knight to the rook when white recaptures. g5, bishop g3, castles queenside. I think just knight bd2 from white is all right. A little uncomfortable for white, but nothing major. I don't know why white's thinking there. I mean, that's a completely forced move, so you should just play it right away. That's a very important thing, time management-wise. Likewise here, I mean, there's nothing to think about for white, so got to play this. So g takes f3. Okay, so I think I'm just going to castle. I could also maybe consider this move. Maybe that's not a bad idea. Try to post the knight on f5. Because perhaps I could castle queenside then. Go here, here. Drive the bishop back to g3, castle queenside, and then my rook is already poised nicely on this file. Kind of like that. Actually, the knight on f5 could be pretty annoying for white. I don't think I have to play g5. If I play g5, it kicks the bishop back, but then it might make it more likely for white to offload one of their doubled pawns. So play f4, or potentially even the h-pawn later, play h4. White has a hook to latch onto there. So yeah, let's do this. I think this is a decent plan. If white takes, I can take either way, bishop or king, and just bring a rook to the d file. Again, better pawn structure. Okay, so white develops. I think that's reasonable. Knight f5 or knight g6. I kind of like knight f5 better because not only does it attack the bishop, but it also monitors the d6 square. I have to be aware that white might put the knight in on e4, attack my bishop, and probe that slightly weakened square. So here, just thinking about castling, which way I want to castle, and I'm definitely leaning towards castling queenside. I think I like that better. I'm a little exposed down the c file, but white has a pawn there, so I don't see how white's going to hurt me. And this bishop is sort of raking into my position, but again, white can't really hurt me. My plan from here, probably rook d3 and double up the rooks. I got my eye on that d3 square. I could attack the knight on d2 twice once I get my rooks doubled. The pawn on f3 is a little bit tender. White might need to play king g2 to stabilize things. I'm sort of holding this bishop hostage at all times too. I don't plan to take it, but I could take it later if I wanted to. I'm biased, but I really enjoy playing these positions. I think most good chess players do because there's almost no risk for black in this position. I just have a strategic advantage. My play is very clear. These are pleasant positions to play, and if you saw my last Title Tuesday video, you know that I was having some time pressure. So coming off of that tournament, even though I'm playing someone much lower rated, it's nice to just be able to play quick moves and not worry about it too much. Knight c4, I think that's a good move by my opponent because the knight could come into e5, so angling for a good square, especially if I play rook d3. Rook d3 is tempting now, but knight e5 would refute that move essentially because white would be hitting my rook, defending f3, and hitting f7. So well played by white there. I'm thinking if I want to play my rook up the file, maybe go to d5 instead. Not thrilled about that square though. It'd be nice to just deny white e5 altogether, but I can't play f6 because this pawn would hang. So that's important. I could think about something like h5 maybe, h5, h4, just try to attack that bishop, because h5, if white plays h4 or h3, I can take. So that would be a game winner. But white might go knight e5 next. How to deal with this? Maybe just rook e8. Rook e8, knight e5, then play f6, e5. Rook e8, white can play rook e1, and we're sort of at a standoff on the e-file. Want to play f6, but yeah, it's hindered. So still looking at h5. Rook e8 still appealing to some degree. Could try to force things with b5, but b5 feels a little bit loosening and might just incite white to play this move. And then I have to take a timeout to defend this pawn because f6 runs into knight f7. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about rook d5, knight e5 either. That doesn't seem that great. Could play rook f8 there. I'm thinking I might go ahead and play h5 and try to annoy white, see what they want to do with this bishop. I should also mention that b4 is something I have to consider. If white attacks me with that pawn, I think I can just retreat to e7 and be fine. But then white would force my bishop away from the long diagonal, so that's something to consider. h5, let's say b4. Could just put something on d6 too if I wanted, but I would like to avoid trades is the thing. Okay, yeah, I think I'll play h5 and just see what transpires here, because if b4, at minimum, I can just play bishop e7, I think. Knight e5 and just defend f7. Okay, so white jumps in immediately. So white is allowing me to play this move if I want. Now, whether it's a good idea or not is another question. This h4, not worried about knight takes f7, but this could be played. And I was thinking maybe g5 there. Try to force that bishop further back. But I might be better advised just to defend the f7 pawn. Keep the tension for a move. h4, bishop f4, g5, bishop d2, let's say. Yeah, ultimately I'm going to have to address the threat on f7, so I think I'm just going to do it right away. Yeah, so I got to start adhering to my own advice that before I get below 5 minutes, I need to start playing fast. I spent probably too much time on h5. Okay, my opponent just blundered a piece, but yeah, that they had a good idea with knight c4, knight e5, but blundered it away in one move. Yeah, a lapse by white. I mean, my rook was no longer on the h-file, but I think they just forgot that my knight was covering that square. Okay, h3. I'll probably play f6 because the knight is defending the f3 pawn, so f6, just force it away. Looks good. Knight c4, only safe square. Then I can take f3, and if king g2, play knight h4. And if king g3, play knight f5 check. Pivot that knight around to safety. Yeah, so there, let's take check. Also, it would be fine to play knight e5 here if I wanted. I actually kind of like that move. Let's play that. Knight e5, take f2. Yeah, white's king could start walking up the board, but that feels like white's going to get mated. So I'll do that. Yeah, take check. The only thing is my bishop is hanging here, but I don't think white wants to start walking the plank with their king. I could even play bishop d6 here, and it'd be a trade of rooks. But rook d3 check, king h4, bishop e7, king takes h5, king takes h3. Yeah, I'm not going to calculate too much further than that because this just seems so natural and good. Yeah, so bishop e7. Bishop e7 just solves a lot of issues. Check. I think take on h3. White brings the king back. Rook h4, king g3. So maybe just rook h6. Play a stabilizing move here. That seems nice because this is defended. I can play rook g2, try to force the king onto the h-file and set up future checkmate threats. Take on b2. Yeah, let's take on b2. Capture a pawn. I have this threat now too. Bishop h4 was also a good move. Okay, here I could try to calculate some sort of mate, but this just wins more material. Okay, my opponent resigned. So thank you for the game, No Brain Bill Paid. Yeah, so I see this happening a lot with students that I work with and the opponents that they play at this level. Playing a good game, but then an outright piece blunder. Just bishop h4. Yeah, white just took their eye off the ball and either forgot or didn't realize that the knight was also covering h4. Attacking the rook here, but yeah, overeager. Because white did come up with a good idea here with knight c4 and the knight coming to e5. And I think if white had played something, kind of standard here, let's say, maybe centralize the rook. So rook ae1. I feel like black's a little bit better. I mean, I still like my structure. Maybe I can go g5 next even and try to threaten h4, but it's not a cakewalk, that's for sure. So why don't I take a quick look at this on an analysis board. So the c3 Sicilian, this is a pretty decent line for white. If you're looking for something straightforward against the Sicilian and the open Sicilian, knight f3 followed by d4 doesn't appeal to you, then the c3 Sicilian is a pretty good choice because it's fundamentally sound. White is not developing a piece, but you get to play d4 on the next move a lot of times. Like if black just plays a standard Sicilian move like d6, a lot of times you're going to be able to play this. And establishing these two pawns side by side is extremely nice out of the opening, especially this early, first four moves. Then you can develop your pieces in classical style behind it. Yeah, bishop coming out somewhere here, here, here. Castling, dark square bishop may find a good home on g5 later. Yeah, white enjoys easy development there with a strong control of the center. So c3, and as I was saying, knight f6 and d5 I think are the two strongest replies, and theory backs that up. They're the two most popular replies here. I've experimented with other stuff too. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you might have seen me play b6 a time or two in this position with the idea of d4 and then not taking on d4 but playing bishop b7 and trying to exert long-range pressure on white's center. I don't think black fully equalizes in this, but it is interesting. But yeah, d5, completely fine. Knight f6, e5, knight d5, also fine for black. I've always felt a little uncomfortable in these positions as black, I gotta say, because black does have less space and white can continue trying to expand in the center. Black does obtain sufficient counterplay against these two center pawns, but you gotta know what you're doing in this line. d5, on the other hand, I feel like is a little easier to play even without exact theoretical knowledge. So white takes. If white played e5, black has a number of good replies. I mean, you could even play knight c6 and transpose it into some sort of French, possibly even a good French since you haven't committed to e6 yet. You could maybe get your bishop outside the chain. Also, d4 would be fine in this position if you want to disrupt white from playing d4. So take, queen takes, and like I said, this is a Scandi, but with the moves c5 and c3 included. And as much as I love the Scandi, I got to admit that this is an improved version because white cannot play knight c3 here and harass the queen. So white plays d4, and if you play this line for black, just leave the tension for a little while. Don't feel like you have to take right away. If you take, you do give white an isolated pawn, but then this knight can more easily come out to c3, and your queen may have to move again. So I just play knight f6, knight here, and then bishop g4. This is, in my mind, the most coherent and active way for black to play. Just looking to develop like I did in the game. Play e6 only after the bishop has been liberated from the pawn chain. E6 is also completely fine here if you want to play it that way. You lock in the bishop, but you can develop kind of similarly. Play against white's isolated pawn if you ever take there later. So bishop g4, bishop e2, good move. E6, white castled. I played knight c6. Yeah, so I think here white should play bishop e3 is the best idea. Reinforce this pawn. And now white might be threatening to take on c5. Like say I play bishop e7. It's a bit more likely white will take, because if I recapture with the bishop, I lose a piece because white can play queen takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes c5. So the extra attacker on c5 is going to force black's hand, and after it takes, white can take this way, and yes, white has an isolated queen's pawn, also known as the IQP, but this knight is again going to come to c3, and it's a fight. Both sides have their pluses and minuses here. But my opponent took, and I was talking about whether I want to trade or not. I mean, taking on d1 is obviously an acceptable move and legitimate candidate move, but it just seems to me like I'm helping white ever so slightly by letting them centralize this rook. So you might be able to apply that principle to your own games. If there's a standoff on a file, let your opponent be the first one to take your queen, or maybe even a rook if the rooks are staring at each other. See if you can extract some value that way, because they might just do it and then they don't get to centralize their piece at the same time. So to that end, maybe white's better off not taking here. Something like queen b3 comes to mind, moving the queen and threatening b7, because I actually think this structure would be an improvement for white, even though white has doubled pawns here. The move b4 is pretty appealing, b4, b5. White has some play down the a file. It's a possibility. But white captured. I took with the knight because I don't want to just needlessly take on a weakness, this isolated pawn. So take with the knight. And I think black's already at least equal here. Whether black has an edge or not, open to debate. But I've got all my minor pieces in the game. White still needs to get both of these minor pieces in the game. It is true that white is castled and I haven't. But as I said, when the queens are off the board, you can be more liberal with your king safety. You can often keep your king in the center without too much concern. So bishop g5, but then this h6 move, and I feel like white already has some minor problems here with this knight f4 idea. Might have been better for white to play something like h3 first, which is always a helpful move here. White has f4 covered with the bishop, so I can't jump in there. But h3, just see what I'm going to do with my bishop. If I take, then that solves some problems for white, and white gets the two bishops. So I might play bishop h5, but then in every line, I think it's just helpful that white is thrown in this move. They don't have any back rank problems. They can play g4 if the pin becomes too much of a problem. It's just a slight improvement. Maybe white could play knight bd2 as well, but knight bd2 I still might go here, although then the bishop could leave, and at least then white has another defender on f3. If I take, white doesn't have to double their pawns. They can recapture with the knights. So that also comes to mind. But yeah, my opponent played bishop g5, I played h6, and bishop here, and then I pounced on this opportunity to play knight f4. If white wanted to stop knight f4, then they'd have to bring their bishop back to d2 or c1, because they can't go to e3. I've got a double attack on that square. f4 hangs the bishop, so it feels uncomfortable to go back to d2 or c1. I mean, d2 blocks the natural square for the knight, not what white had in mind probably. So not sure what white should do here. I mean, maybe the move white played in the game is fine. Bishop h4, but I do get this in. And I probably would have played bishop d1 here just to try to avoid the structural damage. It's not very fun, but I think it's worth it for white to try to avoid the weaknesses. So rook e1, and I didn't see any way to prolong the tension here and try to extract more value from the tension. So I just traded, take, and then knight e7. Castling also fine, but I think at some point I should try to get rid of this bishop. Could also try to play bishop e7 if I wanted to try to trade the bishops and maybe play this. Again, look to put the knight over here. I've got some nice squares I can look to jump into. But I didn't see a good reason to trade pieces, so if white wants to trade, I was okay with that. But again, it's sort of that principle I was talking about earlier. If white trades, I can maybe take with a king, and that helps me. That helps me coordinate my position. Also, I'd have a bishop versus a knight with pawns on both sides of the board. That tends to favor the bishop, so I wouldn't have minded that. So knight d2, knight f5 hit the bishop, bishop g3. Castles. I kind of wonder, in view of this knight c4, knight e5 operation, kind of wonder if I made the right call in castling queenside. Because I could have just castled short, but I don't know. It's a little less dynamic, but I feel like black should be better here with the rook coming to the center, because the king helping to defend f7 is pretty handy in light of that plan. So I underestimated this knight coming here. I'm kind of curious what the computer says about this position. So I thought for a while on this move. This was by far my longest think of the game. I think I thought for about 3 minutes. And I played h5. I am just curious what Stockfish is going to say. So Stockfish does give me a pretty large advantage here. It might be kind of hard for you guys to see, but this is a minus 0.8 to 0.9 advantage. So in other words, it thinks that black is almost a full pawn ahead strategically in this position, because material is equal and there's no immediate tactics. But okay, the computer approves of h5. So I am glad to see that. Yeah, one of my other candidate moves, rook d5, is also up there too. But it's annoying, I got to admit, this knight e4 move. So let's scroll ahead here. h5. Yeah, now white quickly played knight e5. And again, it seems I played the best move, rook hf8. I was considering just playing this, but I just thought white would play bishop f4 and kind of ignore me, g5, and maybe even drop the bishop back here. The computer's unimpressed by this. It says white should play knight takes f7. Probably because, yeah, there's so many weak pawns that black has. Like take and, yeah, rook takes h6, take e6. White does get some pawns, it's true. Threat of like going here as well. Okay. I'm also curious, just going to check what the computer thinks about this moment, or I was debating which side to castle. Yeah, it thinks castling queenside's fine. Also says maybe h5 right away. Yeah, it makes sense. While I have the engine on, maybe I can check for white what to do right here. Is bishop d1 the best move? According to the engine, yep, seems so. Bishop d1, top move of the engine. Black's better by a half pawn after bishop d1, but it places that firmly ahead of rook e1. So, you know, I try to display in these videos, and especially in my standard playlist, the 15-minute games that I played over the years, how to best use the engine. And I think it's like this. You know, I'm trying to draw my own conclusions first, even if they're pretty minor, like cursory decisions, or cursory conclusions, that is. I'm not just immediately turning on the engine as soon as the game's over. If you do that, you're not going to learn anything. You got to formulate these thoughts yourself. Force yourself to do that if you have trouble. Be disciplined about it, because that's just a much more healthy learning process than just, you know, if you just turn the engine on, it's the equivalent of Googling information and feeling like you got more intelligent as a result. Like you pretty much just, you looked up an answer is what you did. You know, you didn't really learn anything in the process of trying to find the answer. So, okay. Yeah, so knight e5 and rook hf8, and this is where the opponent blundered the bishop. And bishop h4 was played almost immediately. So that was just an outright oversight by white that my knight was covering that square. Just trying to explore how the game might continue. I was mentioning this b4 move. I thought white might play that, maybe even back here. I should check this moment too. So if white played b4 right at this stage here, attacking the bishop, and engine says just retreat the bishop, knight e5, and again, just defend this pawn. Yeah, I'm causing some problems. But at least now black has, or white rather, has more options. I mean, h3 is even possible, as is one of the lines up here, because if I take, white can just take back because my bishop is not patrolling this. One thing I was trying to induce from white by playing h5 is maybe a panicky or instinctive reaction playing h4 or h3 to stop me from playing h5, but that would be a blunder, thanks again to this bishop here. White can't recapture. But if white plays b4, it might be possible to do that. Yeah, it's too bad, because I was curious how the game would play out here. Engine's showing about, now up to minus 1.2 advantage for black. I mean, in my mind, that's not a whole lot different than the evaluation earlier. If anything, I thought white had gained a little bit by playing knight c4 to e5, but yeah, it still thinks that black is doing pretty well. Likes playing either rook d5 next or bishop d6. I was also thinking about f6, and I was also curious what white was going to do about this bishop situation, because I might try to close the net on the bishop pretty soon. Just following the top line of the engine, like a4, wants me to play g5, now b4, kick the bishop, bishop d6, yeah, create some problems for white, knight c4, looking to trade, bishop c7. Again, notice this. There's a possible trade of the bishops here, but by not taking, not being the first one to take, which would allow white to take back and straighten out their pawns, I can try to extract more and make white retain this poor structure. Let white come to me. Probably play h4 next if given the choice. Get to an endgame like this, and black's structural advantage still persists. Okay. And I don't think the rest of the game is all that interesting, just converting an advantage here. Trying to be vigilant, not using too much time, being practical, trading pieces. Those are all useful things to do when you're in a winning position. You know, it's tempting to try to find a forced mate right around here, and there might be one. It honestly doesn't even interest me that much to look for a forced mate, because the position is winning, and in a practical game, it's just a matter of how you do it without allowing counterplay from your opponent. You know, so like here, this is a good example right in this position. The computer may say that there's a better move than bishop d6, but bishop d6, I have, you know, close to 5 minutes on my clock. I know I'm winning at least 2 points more of material by pinning the rook and potentially winning the rook. So why look any further than that? Unless there was like a mate in one or some very easy calculation that I could do. But let's just put the engine on and see. Okay, in this case, bishop d6 is the best move according to the computer, but you can see pretty much everything wins. I am happy to see that most of my conclusions I was drawing were correct according to what Stockfish 10 is telling me. All right. So thank you to NoBrainBillPaid for the game. I don't know them, but I will send them the link to this when I upload it. Thank you guys for watching. This was Climbing the Rating Ladder. Hope you guys have a good weekend, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye.